The stars looked cold and distant through the observation deck of Station Alpha 7. Captain Jake Morrison stood alone watching the massive human fleet drift silently in the darkness. 300 years had passed since humanity went to sleep. 300 years since the war ended with tears and defeat. The 17 Ark ships floated like sleeping giants in the void, each one carrying millions of humans in frozen dreams. Jake walked the empty corridors of his station every day. The walls hummed with the sound of machines keeping everything alive. His footsteps echoed in the silence. He was one of the few humans who stayed awake to guard the sleepers. It was a lonely job, but someone had to do it. Someone had to make sure the fleet stayed safe while humanity rested. Lieutenant Amy Brooks worked in the engineering section deep inside the station. She checked the cryogenic systems every day to make sure they worked perfectly. The sleeping humans depended on these machines to stay alive. Amy had been awake for 50 years now. She took the duty from her father who had served before her. Her family had made a promise to guard the sleepers, and she would keep that promise. Until her last breath, the alien peacekeepers helped them watch over the fleets. Veltar was a Cathani who had volunteered for this duty. His people believed in honor and keeping promises. They had made a vow to protect the sleeping humans from any harm. Veltar was tall and thin with silver skin that glowed softly in the dark. He spoke in a gentle voice and treated the human crew with respect. The galaxy had changed since the war ended. The hegemony ruled everything now. They controlled thousands of worlds and billions of alien lives. Their empire stretched across the stars like a giant web. But they had one rule that never changed: never wake the humans. Never disturb their sleep. This was the most important law in the galaxy, and breaking it meant death. Admiral Carlos Rivera had planned for this day before he went into the deep sleep. He was the smartest military leader humanity had ever known. Before entering the cryogenic pod, he had set up secret monitoring stations all across space. These hidden bases watched the hegemony and waited for the right moment. They had one job: to wake the human fleets if the aliens ever broke their promise to leave humanity alone. The hegemony capital world was called Zephyr Prime. It was a beautiful planet with crystal cities and floating towers. Chancellor Thexmar ruled from a palace made of living metal that changed colors with his moods. He was old now and had forgotten the lessons of the war. His people lived in comfort and luxury. They thought themselves safe from any threats. Strange. Reports came to the Chancellor's desk every few weeks. Outer Rim worlds had gone silent without explanation. Long-range sensors detected unknown energy signatures moving through empty space. Ships disappeared on patrol routes that had been safe for centuries, but Thexmar ignored these warnings. He believed nothing could challenge the mighty hegemony. The alien generals tried to remind him about human history. They told stories of the war when humans fought with impossible courage. They spoke of human ships that rammed enemy vessels when their weapons failed. They remembered human soldiers who kept fighting even when bleeding and broken. But the Chancellor laughed at these old tales. He said the humans were weak and defeated. They would never wake up from their eternal sleep. Deep in space, the hidden monitoring stations did their silent work. Beacon Alpha 7 watched the border regions where hegemony fleets moved in secret. Automated systems recorded everything and sent the data to sleeping computers in the human Ark ships. These machines learned and planned and waited for their moment to act. Amy Brooks finished her daily inspection of the cryogenic bay. Millions of pods stretched out in perfect rows like a frozen army. Inside each pod, a human dreamed of better days. Some dreamed of Earth with its blue skies and green forests. Others dreamed of the colonies they had lost in the war. All of them dreamed of going home someday. Jake Morrison received his daily reports. From the peacekeeping stations around the fleet, everything seemed normal and quiet. The alien guards did their duties without complaint. The automated systems worked perfectly. The sleepers rested in peace. But something felt different today. The stars seemed brighter, and the space around them felt charged with electricity. Veltar noticed it too. His sensitive alien senses detected changes in the cosmic radiation levels. The quantum fields that surrounded the fleet were shifting in patterns he had never seen before. He checked his instruments 3 times, but the readings stayed the same. Something was coming, and it was coming fast. The first alarm sounded at midnight station time. Beacon Alpha 7 had detected massive hegemony fleet movements toward the neutral zones. Hundreds of alien warships were moving in formation toward the areas where human arc ships drifted in their long sleep. The automated protocols recognized this as a threat to the sleeping humans. Jake Morrison ran to the command center as more alarms joined the first. His screens lit up with warning signals from across the galaxy. Amy Brooks raced from the engineering section with her tools still in her hands. Veltar moved with alien grace toward the communication station to contact his superiors. The main computer spoke in a calm voice that cut through all the noise. Condition red detected. Hegemony forces approaching protected zones. Initiating Protocol 7. Beginning awakening sequence for all human fleets. Jake Morrison felt his heart stop. For a moment, Protocol 7 meant total war. It meant waking up every human in every fleet across the galaxy. It meant the end of the long sleep and the beginning of something that would shake the stars themselves. He looked at Amy Brooks and saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. They had guarded the sleepers for so long that they had almost forgotten. This day would come. Now it was here, and everything would change. The galaxy would learn why their ancestors had made the law about never waking the humans. In the deepest part of Sanctuary 7, the first cryogenic pods began their warming cycles. The first humans to wake up were the military commanders who had been chosen for fast revival. Admiral Susan Parker opened her eyes after 3 centuries of dreamless sleep and immediately asked for a status report. Her voice was rough from the long hibernation, but her mind was sharp and clear. She had gone to sleep as a young woman and woke up in the same body but in a completely different galaxy. General Ryan Mitchell pulled himself out of his cryogenic pod with hands that shook from the cold. The revival process always left people weak and confused for the first few hours. But he had trained for this moment before going to sleep. His muscle memory kicked in as he reached for the emergency protocols that would bring the rest of the military staff online. The medical bay filled with steam as more pods opened in sequence. Dr. Helen Garcia supervised the awakening process. While fighting off her own revival sickness, she had to make sure that every person who woke up received proper medical attention. The long sleep could cause problems with heart rhythms and blood pressure. Some people needed medication to help their bodies adjust to being alive again. Commander Peter Lewis stumbled to the engineering station and began checking the ship systems. What he found amazed him. The automated maintenance robots had not just kept everything working during the long sleep. They had actually improved the technology. The weapons were more powerful than when he went to sleep. The engines were faster and more efficient. The computers had learned new tricks and developed better software. Captain Jake Morrison met with the newly awakened commanders in the main conference room. The walls displayed tactical information about the current situation in the galaxy. Hegemony fleets were moving closer to the human zones every hour. Their intentions were clear. They planned to destroy the sleeping humans once and for all. Lieutenant Amy Brooks worked frantically to speed up the awakening process. Normally it took weeks to safely revive people from cryogenic sleep, but they had only days before the hegemony scouts reached their position. She pushed the systems to their limits while Dr. Garcia monitored the medical data to make sure nobody died from the rapid revival. The alien peacekeepers faced an impossible choice. Veltar and his Cathani colleagues had sworn oaths to protect the sleeping humans, but they also feared what awakened humanity might do to the galaxy. Some of their people chose to honor their promises and help the humans prepare for war. Others tried to escape to warn the hegemony about what was happening. Major Lisa Thompson led the human security forces that intercepted the fleeing aliens. She had been one of the first to wake up after the command staff. Her job was to make sure that no information about the human awakening reached enemy forces. The aliens who tried to betray their oaths found themselves locked in detention cells with no way to contact their governments. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in 16 other human fleets. Millions of people opened their eyes to find themselves in the middle of a crisis. The automated systems had woken them all at the same time using quantum communication links that worked faster than light. Every human fleet received the same orders: prepare for immediate combat operations on the hegemony worlds. Panic spread as their sensors detected strange energy signatures from the human zones. Admiral Krexval commanded the largest battle fleet in hegemony space. He received orders to investigate the disturbances and eliminate any threats to galactic peace. His ships moved toward the human fleets with weapons ready and shields raised for battle. The first group of fully awakened humans gathered in the main assembly hall of Sanctuary 7. These were the veterans of the original war who remembered the taste of defeat. They had gone to sleep with anger in their hearts and woke up with that same fury burning even hotter. 300 years of forced exile had not cooled their desire for justice. Chief Engineer Kate Phillips revealed the true nature of the Ark ships to the awakening crews. Each vessel was not just a refugee transport but a complete mobile shipyard and weapons factory. During the long sleep, the automated systems had been building new fighters and constructing advanced weapon systems. The sleeping humans had become a fleet capable of conquering the entire galaxy. Colonel Nick Carter began organizing the military forces as more people woke up from their frozen dreams. The human population was smaller now than before the war, but every person was a trained soldier or specialist. They had learned from their defeat and spent years preparing for this moment. Every man and woman knew their role in the coming battle. Dr. Maria Santos studied intelligence reports about how alien society had changed during humanity's absence. The hegemony had grown soft and comfortable in their dominance. They relied on automated defenses and rigid command structures that could not adapt to unexpected threats. Their military commanders had never faced an enemy that could think creatively or change tactics in the middle of battle. The first direct contact between awakened humans and hegemony forces happened near the outer edge of the neutral zone. Squadron of alien scouts detected the human fleet and moved closer to investigate. They expected to find the same desperate refugees who had fled the galaxy centuries earlier. Instead, they found coordinated military formations with weapons pointed directly at them. Commander Sarah Walsh led the human response to the alien intrusion. Her orders were simple: send a message that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. The hegemony scouts found themselves surrounded by human ships that moved with precision and purpose. When they tried to retreat, they discovered that escape was impossible. The alien ships sent desperate transmissions back to their command centers before being destroyed or captured. The messages all said the same thing: the humans were awake and they were angry. The sleeping giants had opened their eyes and the galaxy would never be the same again. Admiral Susan Parker stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the tactical displays showing human fleets across the galaxy coming online. 17 separate armadas were preparing for war against an enemy that had ruled unchallenged for 3 centuries. The odds seemed impossible, but she had learned never to underestimate human determination. The final phase of the awakening began as the last. Cryogenic pods opened throughout the human fleets. Engineers and scientists and soldiers all opened their eyes to find themselves part of the largest military operation in galactic history. They had gone to sleep as refugees and defeated survivors. They woke up as an army that would reshape the stars themselves. General Ryan Mitchell issued the first combat orders to all human forces. The message was broadcast on quantum channels to every ship in every fleet. This is not a war of conquest. This is a war of liberation. We will free every enslaved world and bring justice to every oppressed people. The galaxy will learn that humanity keeps its promises and never forgets its enemies. Admiral Krexval commanded the largest battle fleet the hegemony had assembled in decades. His ships moved through space in perfect formation with weapons charged and shields at maximum power. He expected to find sleeping human refugees and destroy them quickly before they could cause any trouble. Instead, he found a nightmare that would haunt his people for generations: the human fleet that met Krexval's forces was unlike anything the aliens had seen before. Captain Alex Turner commanded the battleship New Houston from a bridge that hummed with advanced technology. His weapon systems had been improved during the long sleep by automated factories that never stopped working. When the battle began, the hegemony forces discovered that their enemies could fight in ways they had never imagined. The alien ships fired first with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes that could destroy entire cities. But the human vessels moved like dancers, avoiding every shot while returning fire with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. New Houston alone destroyed 3 alien cruisers in the first minute of combat using energy beams that cut through their shields like paper. Commander Rachel Moore led a squadron of human fighters in attacks against hegemony supply lines. Her pilots had trained in virtual reality simulations during their long sleep. They knew every weakness in alien ship designs and exploited them with surgical precision. Within hours, the hegemony rear guard was in complete chaos as their logistics networks collapsed under human assault. The psychological warfare began immediately after the first victories. Human communications specialists broadcast messages across all hegemony frequencies. They reminded the aliens exactly why their ancestors had established the law about never waking humanity. The broadcasts included historical footage from the original war showing human soldiers who kept fighting even when their bodies were broken and bleeding. Dr. Victor Hayes analyzed captured alien intelligence files and made a disturbing discovery. The hegemony empire had become weak and bureaucratic during their centuries of unchallenged rule. Their military commanders followed rigid procedures that could not adapt to creative human tactics. Their soldiers were trained to fight against other aliens who followed predictable patterns of behavior. The neutral alien species throughout the galaxy watched the conflict with growing alarm. The Kethani ambassador Zarthal attempted to arrange peace talks between the warring factions, but Admiral Susan Parker made humanity's position completely clear. There would be no negotiation and no compromise. The hegemony had 3 choices: complete withdrawal from human territory, payment of war reparations, or total destruction. Chancellor Lexmark received reports of the military disasters from his Crystal Palace on Zephyr Prime. Each update brought worse news than the last. Entire fleets were being destroyed by forces that seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. His generals demanded reinforcements, but there were no reserve forces large enough to stop the human advance. General Hexmar was one of the few aliens who remembered the original war against humanity. He had been a young officer then and had seen firsthand what humans could do when pushed to their limits. He tried to explain to the current leadership that they were facing an enemy unlike any other. Humans did not surrender when their situation became hopeless. They became more dangerous. Lieutenant Colonel Brian Davis led covert operations teams deep into hegemony space. His soldiers moved through alien territory like ghosts, collecting intelligence and preparing for larger operations. They discovered that many subject species actually hated their hegemony overlords and would welcome human intervention. The empire that seemed so powerful from the outside was rotting from within. Master Sergeant Kelly Johnson infiltrated a hegemony research facility and uncovered evidence of systematic technology suppression. The aliens had deliberately kept their subject species primitive and dependent. They feared that advanced technology in the wrong hands could threaten their dominance. This policy had created billions of potential allies for the human cause. The space battles continued across multiple star systems as human fleets pressed their advantage. Hegemony commanders tried every defensive strategy they knew, but nothing worked against human adaptability. When the aliens deployed new weapons, the humans quickly developed countermeasures. When they changed their tactics, the humans changed. Theirs even faster. Captain Linda Foster commanded a human strike force that captured an entire hegemony communication hub without firing a shot. Her team used electronic warfare systems to take control of the alien computers and turn their own defenses against them. The facility surrendered when its automated weapons began targeting hegemony ships instead of human vessels. The most shocking discovery came when Dr. Patricia Lee began examining ancient records captured from hegemony archives. She was an archaeologist. who specialized in alien history, and her findings changed everything. The original war between humans and aliens had been started by false flag operations conducted by the hegemony themselves. They had attacked their own colonies and blamed humanity. To justify their aggression, the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The hegemony had manipulated events to create a crisis that would allow them to destroy humanity before humans could become a threat to their dominance. They had studied human expansion patterns and realized that peaceful coexistence was impossible. Humans would eventually question alien authority and demand equal treatment in galactic affairs. Admiral Carlos Rivera awakened from his long sleep to find his people at war once again. But this time the conflict was different. This was not a desperate struggle for survival, but a campaign for justice that would reshape the entire galaxy. He took command of all human forces and began implementing battle plans that had been developing in computer simulations for 3 centuries. The psychological impact on hegemony forces became as devastating as their military defeats. Lieutenant Colonel Diana Foster led information warfare campaigns that broadcast the truth about human-alien history across all communication networks. Alien soldiers learned that their empire had been built on lies and genocide. Many units began surrendering rather than continue fighting for a cause they no longer believed in on liberated worlds. Major Gregory Stone worked with local populations to establish new governments that included both human and alien representatives. The humans proved that they had no interest in creating their own empire. They wanted to build something better, a galactic federation where all species could live as equals and pursue their own destinies. Dr. Elizabeth Wong specialized in interspecies relations and helped alien refugees who had suffered under hegemony oppression for centuries. These beings had never known freedom or democracy, but they learned quickly when given the chance. They became some of the strongest supporters of the human cause because they understood what liberation truly meant. The tide of war turned decisively when Commander Nathan Phillips led a daring assault on the hegemony's primary manufacturing world. The operation succeeded through superior strategy rather than brute force. Human troops coordinated with local resistance movements that had been waiting generations for someone to challenge alien authority. The loss of their industrial base forced the hegemony to consider options they had never thought possible. Chancellor Vexmar finally understood that his empire was doomed. The humans were not just winning battles, they were winning hearts and minds across the galaxy. Billions of oppressed beings saw humanity as liberators rather than conquerors. The very foundation of hegemony power was crumbling as subject species began demanding their own freedom and independence. Captain Jennifer Walsh led reconnaissance missions that gathered evidence of systematic oppression throughout hegemony space. Her teams documented countless atrocities and crimes against sentient beings. This evidence would be used later in war crimes tribunals, but for now it served a more immediate purpose. It proved to the galaxy that the hegemony deserved everything that was coming to them. The 17 human arc fleets converged into a single massive armada that stretched across 3 star systems. Admiral Carlos Rivera stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the greatest concentration of military power in galactic history. Ships that had been built during the long sleep moved into formation with vessels that predated the original war. Together they formed an unstoppable force that would reshape the galaxy forever. Colonel Michelle Anderson coordinated the largest joint military operation ever attempted. Over 2 million human personnel worked together with perfect precision, despite being separated by vast distances of space. Quantum communication systems allowed instant coordination between fleets, while advanced tactical computers calculated the optimal deployment of forces across multiple battlefronts simultaneously. Captain Stephen Rogers led the vanguard forces that systematically dismantled hegemony defensive positions across 3 sectors. The aliens had built their fortifications to withstand conventional attacks, but human warfare had evolved beyond their comprehension. Rogers used weapons that manipulated gravity itself to crush enemy installations and energy fields that could phase through solid matter to strike targets from impossible angles. The psychological impact on hegemony forces proved as devastating as the military defeats they suffered. Entire alien fleets surrendered without fighting when they realized they faced awakened humanity. The legends their ancestors had told about human ferocity and determination were proving to be understated rather than exaggerated. Human soldiers really would fight until their last breath, and human commanders really could turn any situation to their advantage. Chief Scientist Andrew Miller revealed the true extent of human technological advancement during a briefing to the fleet commanders. The automated laboratories had never stopped working during the long sleep. They had analyzed every piece of alien technology humanity had ever encountered and developed countermeasures for weapons that had not even been invented yet. Human science had leaped forward by centuries while their bodies remained frozen in time. Lieutenant Colonel Diana Foster implemented information warfare campaigns that changed the nature of the conflict itself. Her broadcasts reached every corner of hegemony space, carrying the true history of human-alien relations. Billions of beings learned for the first time that their ancestors had lived in peace with humanity before the hegemony manufactured the crisis that led to war. The revelation sparked uprisings on dozens of worlds as subject species demanded their freedom on the liberated planets. Major Gregory Stone oversaw the establishment of new governmental structures that incorporated representatives from every intelligent species. The humans demonstrated that they had no interest in creating another empire based on domination and fear. Instead, they wanted to build a democratic federation where all beings could participate equally in decisions that affected their lives. Dr. Elizabeth Wong worked with alien refugees who had been oppressed under hegemony rule for generations. Many of these beings had never known anything but slavery and exploitation. They struggled to understand concepts like individual rights and democratic representation. But they learned quickly when given the chance and became some of the most passionate advocates for the new order that humanity was creating. The tide of war turned decisively when Commander Nathan Phillips led an assault on the hegemony's primary manufacturing world. The planet produced 60% of all military equipment used by alien forces throughout the galaxy. Phillips succeeded not through superior firepower but through superior intelligence gathering and strategic planning. His forces coordinated with local resistance movements that had been secretly organizing for decades. The operation began with simultaneous strikes against communication centers and transportation hubs. Human forces used stealth technology developed during the long sleep to infiltrate alien installations without triggering defensive systems. Within hours, the planet's entire military infrastructure was under human control, while most of the alien garrison remained unaware that an attack was even taking place. Local populations rose up to support the human invasion. As word spread that liberation forces had arrived, beings who had worked as slave labor in the manufacturing facilities for their entire lives suddenly found themselves free to choose their own destinies. They provided intelligence about hidden installations and secret weapon stockpiles that proved invaluable to the human commanders. The loss of their primary industrial base forced the hegemony leadership to consider surrender for the first time in their history. Chancellor Thexmar sent secret diplomatic communications offering conditional terms for ending the conflict. But Admiral Rivera made it clear that humanity would accept nothing less than complete capitulation and the establishment of war crimes tribunals to judge those responsible for centuries of oppression. Captain Jennifer Walsh led reconnaissance missions that uncovered evidence of systematic atrocities throughout hegemony space. Her teams found mass graves on dozens of worlds where entire populations had been exterminated for resisting alien rule. They documented forced labor camps where beings worked until they died and were replaced by new victims. The evidence would ensure that justice was served when the war ended. The siege of Zephyr Prime began when human fleets surrounded the hegemony capital world. The planet's defensive systems had been designed to withstand attacks from conventional alien forces, but they proved useless against human tactical doctrine. Energy shields that had protected the world for centuries were penetrated by weapons that existed in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, General Ryan Mitchell prepared for the final assault while coordinating with resistance movements inside the capital city. Even on their homeworld, the hegemony faced opposition from subject species who had been waiting centuries for liberation. Underground networks provided intelligence about government installations and helped human special forces infiltrate the planet's surface. The hegemony military command structure collapsed as unit after unit surrendered rather than face human forces in direct combat. Alien commandos who had studied the historical records of the original war understood that resistance was futile. Humans had been outnumbered and outgunned 300 years ago, but had still managed to inflict terrible casualties before their final defeat. Now they returned with superior technology and an unquenchable thirst for justice. Communication intercepts revealed panic spreading through the highest levels of alien government. Ministers and administrators fled the capital carrying whatever wealth they could manage to transport. Many attempted to escape to neutral worlds that might grant them asylum from human justice. But there would be no sanctuary for those who had participated in the oppression of innocent beings. The final phase of the campaign began when human forces breached the outer defenses of Zephyr Prime landing craft filled with human soldiers, descended through the planet's atmosphere while orbital bombardment eliminated strategic targets with surgical precision. The once mighty capital of the galaxy's greatest empire found itself completely helpless against the awakened fury of humanity. Admiral Carlos Rivera issued his final ultimatum to the remaining hegemony leadership. They had 1 hour to surrender unconditionally or face the complete destruction of their government and military forces. The message was broadcast across all communication frequencies to ensure that every being in the galaxy heard humanity's promise. The age of alien dominance was ending, and a new chapter in galactic history was about to begin. Colonel Michelle Anderson watched the tactical displays showing hegemony forces throughout the galaxy laying down their weapons. The empire that had ruled for over 3 centuries was crumbling in a matter of months. What their ancestors had failed to accomplish through peaceful negotiation would now be achieved through the application of overwhelming force combined with unshakable moral authority. The galaxy waited to see what kind of civilization humanity would build from the ashes of the old order. The crystal towers of Zephyr Prime reflected the light of a new dawn as human forces secured the hegemony capital. Admiral Carlos Rivera established his headquarters in the former palace of Chancellor Vexmar, who had fled during the night like a common criminal. The provisional government that Rivera created included representatives from 47 different alien species, many of whom were participating in democratic governance for the first time in their people's history. Dr. Jennifer Martin headed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that would document every crime committed by the hegemony during their centuries of rule. The process was painful but necessary as alien historians worked alongside human researchers to compile a complete record of oppression and genocide. Many species had to confront uncomfortable truths about their own complicity in the suffering of others. Commander Robert Taylor led the security forces that protected alien officials who cooperated with the new government. Extremist groups from several species wanted to continue the old ways of domination and violence. They targeted moderate leaders who advocated cooperation with humanity and peaceful transition to democratic rule. Taylor's troops worked around the clock to ensure that the voices of reason could be heard, above the cries for revenge. Captain Michelle Clark commanded the peacekeeping forces that maintained order during the difficult transition period. The collapse of the hegemony had created power vacuums throughout the galaxy that various factions sought to exploit. Pirates and warlords emerged from hiding to claim territory while legitimate governments struggled to establish authority. Clark's forces intervened wherever civilian populations faced threats from criminal organizations. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Wilson oversaw the demobilization of former hegemony military units. Many alien soldiers had served their governments faithfully without knowing the true extent of their empire's crimes. Wilson separated those who could be trusted to serve the new Federation from war criminals, who would face justice in international tribunals. The process required careful investigation of each individual's service record and personal conduct. The establishment of the Galactic Democratic Federation became humanity's greatest achievement and most challenging task. President Sarah Miller was elected by representatives from dozens of worlds in the first truly democratic election in galactic history. Her inauguration ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy as billions of beings witnessed the peaceful transfer of power from military commanders to civilian leadership. The new galactic charter established principles that the hegemony had opposed for centuries. Every intelligent species had the right to self-determination and equal participation in decisions that affected their lives. No government could claim authority over beings who had not chosen to accept its rule. Resources would be shared fairly rather than extracted by force for the benefit of dominant species. On former hegemony worlds, the changes were dramatic and swift. Dr. Christopher Davis led scientific exchange programs that shared human technology with species that had been deliberately kept in technological stagnation. Worlds that had suffered under resource extraction for generations began to see environmental restoration and economic development under the new democratic governments. The restoration of Earth became a symbol of hope for oppressed beings throughout the galaxy. Human terraforming technology had advanced dramatically during the long exile in space. The homeworld that had been devastated by war 3 centuries earlier was transformed into a garden planet more beautiful than it had ever been before. Representatives from every species were invited to witness the miracle of renewal and rebirth. Captain Jake Morrison returned to Earth for the first time since his ancestors had fled in defeat. He walked through forests that had been replanted with trees from 1,000 different worlds. The memorial gardens honored all species that had suffered under hegemony rule. Human and alien children played together in parks where monuments reminded future generations of the price of freedom and the cost of oppression. Admiral Susan Parker served as Secretary of Defense for the new Federation while working to prevent the militarization that had characterized the old regime. The democratic government maintained strong defensive forces, but emphasized diplomacy and cooperation over conquest and domination. Military academies taught officers to protect civilian populations rather than subjugate them. Lieutenant Amy Brooks continued her work maintaining the technology that made galactic civilization possible. The advanced systems developed during humanity's long sleep became the foundation for improvements in transportation, communication, and manufacturing throughout the Federation. Brooks led teams of human and alien engineers who adapted these innovations for use by all member species. Veltar represented the Cathani people in the new Galactic Senate, where former enemies worked together to address common challenges. The silver-skinned alien had kept his promise to protect sleeping humanity and now helped build the peaceful galaxy that their sacrifice had made possible. His speeches about honor and cooperation became required reading in schools throughout Federation space. The war crimes tribunals began their work on hundreds of worlds, where hegemony officials faced justice for their actions. The proceedings were conducted fairly with full legal representation for all defendants. Many received pardons in exchange for cooperation with truth commissions, while others faced imprisonment or exile for their crimes against sentient beings. Dr. Maria Santos established cultural exchange programs that helped different species understand each other's perspectives and values. The galaxy had been divided by fear and prejudice for so long that many beings had forgotten how to communicate across species barriers. Santos organized festivals and educational programs that celebrated diversity while building bridges between formerly hostile peoples. Trade agreements replaced extraction treaties as the foundation of interstellar commerce. Worlds that had been forced to export their resources at artificially low prices suddenly found themselves negotiating as equals with their former oppressors. Economic prosperity spread throughout the galaxy as fair trade policies created opportunities for development and growth. The transformation was not without challenges and setbacks. Some species struggled to adapt to democratic institutions after centuries of authoritarian rule. Economic inequality and social tensions created problems that required patient work and careful attention. But the principles established in the Galactic Charter provided a framework for peaceful resolution of conflicts. Educational systems throughout the Federation began teaching the true history of galactic civilization. Children learned about the diversity of intelligent life and the importance of cooperation between different species. They studied the mistakes of the past to ensure that future generations would never repeat the errors that had led to war and oppression. Admiral Carlos Rivera stood in the restored gardens of Earth watching human and alien diplomats work together to solve problems that had seemed impossible just years earlier. The law that had forbidden waking the humans had been replaced by a new principle that would guide galactic civilization for centuries to come. Never again would any species sleep while others suffered in silence. The ceremony dedicating the memorial to victims of hegemony oppression brought together survivors from every corner of the galaxy. They stood together in the shadow of monuments that honored the dead while celebrating the living. The inscription, carved in stone and crystal, proclaimed humanity's promise to future generations that freedom once won would never again be surrendered to tyranny. As night fell over Earth, the lights of 1,000 worlds sparkled in the darkness above. Ships from dozens of species traveled freely through space that had once belonged to a single oppressive empire. The galaxy that humanity had awakened to liberate was becoming the peaceful federation that their ancestors had dreamed of building before the first shots of the ancient war were fired.